So let's begin with a bracha. And okay, let's start with a bracha. La'asok b'divrei Torah, that I believe Suzanne put in the chat. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, sovereign of the world, who commands us to be engaged in words, acts, and deeds of Torah. Amen. So I want to start with a disturbing conversation that I had recently with a bar or bat mitzvah student. I'm not going to let you know which, because I want to maintain confidentiality, but tell the story. We were talking about in preparation for bat mitzvah, the change from when sacrifice stopped, the child was quite upset with the idea that we would sacrifice animals in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and was happy to know that that changed. And instead, after the destruction of the temple, prayer was what was done. And then also I tried to complicate the narrative, and I'll complicate the narrative for all of you, which is we often say that prayer replaced the avodah service. The avodah means work, but it meant the work in the temple, and it meant sacrifice. And now avodah, at least according to the Talmud, means avodah shebalev, the work of the heart, and that is prayer. But it's not so easy historically to say that there was a one-to-one correlation and that prayer only started after the destruction of the temple, right? Possibly there was a diaspora community after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. And there were diaspora communities that didn't come back to Israel, kind of like ours. And they had a prayer life while we still had the sacrificial system in Jerusalem. Certainly after the destruction of the second temple, the rabbis start to begin to change Jewish tradition in radical ways by creating a one-to-one. Here was sacrifice, and now here is prayer at the same times of the day. That's not the disturbing part of the conversation. Disturbing part of the conversation was when I said to this child who's been in Hebrew school since first grade and is now in seventh grade, tell me about a time when you prayed. And the answer was, never.
Weird. Ooh.
And the parent said, but you've been in services. And there was a disconnect between what one might do at a service and prayer.
Wow.
And now I want to tell you another story. This is a really personal story of mine. Keep that story in mind. Wait, I think I can see you better without my glasses because of the awesome cataract surgery. Okay. So years ago. So the day was 9/11. If I told the story before, I'm sorry, it's part of my narrative. And the world was in shock. And I was serving a small conservative synagogue in Philadelphia at Large Street and Roosevelt Boulevard in a relatively low-income, poor neighborhood. And it was a blessed, beautiful community. And we were watching on TV, as you were, I'm sure. And then I got a call from Reverend Robin Heinecke of the United Methodist Church in Frankfurt. And then I spoke with the local imam in Frankfurt. And then I spoke with one of the other ministers, and we decided that we needed to gather that night. And so 2 ministers and myself and a Talmud professor from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College met to devise a service and got the word out. We met at a different synagogue that we thought would have good parking so that we could come together to pray. So we go to plan a service at the place where every good service is planned, the Country Club Diner. And we order our coffee and whatever else we're getting, usually tuna sandwiches and fries. Oh, I'm sorry for that noise. That's the dog playing with her toy. And we start to put a service together, the outlines of a service. We don't know how many people we'll get, but there were 8 synagogues, there were a lot of churches, and there was one mosque. We ended up, by the way, getting between 700 and 800 people that night. So we put together readings and psalms and lots of stuff. And then I was going to go back to my synagogue and cut and paste, because we didn't at that time yet know how to do it on the computer so well, physically with a scissors, cut and paste, and then Xerox. And then the minister, who I love and respect, he's now the minister of Arch Street Methodist across from City Hall in Philly, says to me, but Andy, when do we pray? Because for Jews, coming to a prayer service means we give you a set list of prayers that are written already, and we recite them or we sing them. And for my dear friend, Reverend Robin Heinecke, prayer was when we stop and invite people to open their hearts and to call out with their innermost needs and grief and joy and everything. Prayer was a call to reflection. And what we were doing by singing a psalm or chanting, or even saying an El Maleh prayer, didn't feel like prayer. And so it made me stop. What do these stories have in common? My learning about prayer from my minister friend and the child. And I want to jump in.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think they're
Marsha.
I think they're the same. To the child, the prayers that we recited were congregational, were worldwide at the same time. Well, we always did the same prayers worldwide. But prayer to this child may have been his or her innermost thoughts, even if the child was asking God for something, or wanted to tell God a story or tell God something that happened.
But
Again,
I guess I'm
wasn't
saying we
personal.
failed this child because this child didn't know doesn't yet. I mean, now we're working on it, but know what prayer is really reflective. I'm going to go back to the Israeli lihit palel. What binyan is that in, Gila? Lihit palel. It's a reflexive verb to do introspection. And what this child thought prayer was coming to a service and droning, chanting or singing, because that's what we try in Hebrew school, to have them learn the matbeya, the actual format of the prayer. And I feel like we as Jews struggle, and we can learn from our Christian neighbors a great deal about prayer, from the idea that prayer has got to be in your heart and in your kishkas. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, the preeminent modern Orthodox rabbi of the last century, said that if you said the first paragraph of the Amidah by rote, and did not have kavanah, intention during it, you didn't fulfill your mitzvah to pray. Can you hold on one second? Tani, stop. She's eating the table. Hold on one sec.
Okay, what? No, it comes on. It's a finger.
I have a straw. I have a little straw ottoman and she's eating it. So I use this bitter apple stuff. Okay. Cute but destructive puppy. So how is prayer a mitzvah? Because you know what, we've been talking about mitzvot as actions like visiting the sick, returning a lost object. So tonight we're going to study prayer qua mitzvah. Prayer as mitzvah, prayer as a commandment. If you want to translate commandment or mitzvah, prayer is Jewish action, but prayer is what the Jews do, either individually or communally. So I now have sent you the entire booklet. So
Right.
you have it. We're on page 17. So if you want to flip to page 17. And welcome everyone, by the way, welcome.
You can see the pages.
It's also in the chat. The
It's also
page
in the
number is the
chat.
bottom right.
Yes,
We're
thank you.
there. We're there.
Actually, I wanted to ask one question before. Would anyone here be willing to tell about an impactful prayer experience that you've had, whether it be individually or in a group? And of course, we won't share it, right? We'll keep it among ourselves. Najat, and welcome, Najat.
Hi, everyone. I want to share with you my first prayer experience, which happened at the last Rosh Hashanah at the Reform Service of Princeton University. And it was actually my first time entering a synagogue. And I sat there on the second row, and back then I didn't know who my grandmother was, what was her Jewish name, and where my Jewish family was. I just knew that she was Jewish, and I had no way to find those roots. And I sat there and I prayed for that. I just asked for, just finding some answers. And 3 days later, or just after Rosh Hashanah, I'm not sure, I found her, and I found her name, and through DNA tests, and I found my family in Israel and in Europe, and her name was Maria Cohen, and that's how it all, made sense to me. It was the most powerful experience ever for me, and yeah, that's my story. That's how it happened.
Well, anyone else want to share? Thank you. Sam Daly Harris.
This will be an odd one somewhat. The organization I had headed organized candlelight vigils before the World Summit for Children in 1990. And I was in California and going to speak at Robert Schuler's church about the World Summit for Children. He had bumped his head on a car, and it was a Presbyterian minister from Seattle who was doing the TV broadcast. And the night before, I was in a hotel room, this Jewish guy about to talk the next morning at several services about the World Summit for Children. And I prayed that I would have something of meaning and value to say to those assembled the next morning. And the next morning in the Crystal Cathedral, it was good.
Someone else?
I do.
Okay.
Mine, but most meaningful was when my dad passed away, and it's like almost 15 years ago. And my specific prayer was, give me calm, like inner calm. And what I did was I went and enrolled in art school, and I got my fine arts degree. And the answer that I got every time that I walked into the class was when I delved into either the clay or the paint. And I felt that it gave me inner peace and also greater emuha, faith.
Emuna, yeah, Emuna.
Emuna. Yeah, thank you. And that was like a 2-year, like, for my fine arts. And it was like the best closure, because I didn't know what I should feel or what I was to expect. And everyone says, oh, you should grieve, grieve, grieve. But for me, it was such peacefulness, and it gave me a more sense of joy, like inner joy. And I felt that like during every class session, like it was something that I was able to share back with like my classmates on a artistic level, which was very personal for me, and it just kept me going. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah, Suzanne.
Mine isn't, it never necessarily has an outcome, but I saw somebody in our congregation who after at their conclusion of the Amidah would just take a moment to themselves. And I started doing that myself, just summing up what I was thankful for the week and what I'm looking to improve for the week ahead, whether it's something very specific or something very general, either way, but it's a nice personal part of prayer as opposed to just reading the wonderful words. And I go toward the interpretive Amidah words from the old Siddur, but it's just something that's much more personal for me. And I find that is very connecting.
I'm gonna tell you mine because I'm starting to cry, and while I think about it, because prayer is really a part of my life, but the most memorable prayer was pretty recently, about 3 years ago, about 5 days before Rosh Hashanah. My sister and I drove our mother, who was ailing, 2 hours away to see our dying brother. And we put them together. And I had to walk out on the porch for a little because I was listening to my mother say, don't give up, to my brother. And he was already in hospice after battling cancer for 5 years, and this was going to be the end. And I prayed for peace for her. And I prayed that he wouldn't suffer long. And he died 5 days later, the day after Rosh Hashanah. He always would write my sermons with, or he'd like edit my sermons. And so he got to see the Rosh Hashanah sermon on the live stream, second day of Rosh Hashanah, and then he died the next night. And the prayer really was that my mom be spared watching him suffer, and that he not suffer. And that prayer was not in a prayer book. It was in the depths of my soul. And I was crying. And then I knew that I wasn't going to do a Misha Berach for healing because there wasn't going to be healing. And that felt like it was going to be a bracha levatala, a prayer. I don't know how to say that in English. How do you say that in English? Anyone? Bracha levatala.
In waste.
Yeah, a wasted prayer. So it was at a time of real need. And the need was, I kind of knew in my own prayer life, I wasn't praying for him to be healed. I was praying for him to die peacefully. Anyone else? Now that I'm weeping. Yeah, Ellen.
Well, mine has a little bit of a happier ending.
Thank you. Well, this was a
It'll be
happy
nice.
ending because you didn't suffer anymore.
Well, I know
Yeah.
that's good. And I can commiserate with you because I lost a brother also. But 19 years ago in May, my husband needed a kidney transplant. And our son, who was at the time 30 years old, said, I'll do it. And I will never forget the day that I sat in that hospital in Livingston in St. Barnabas. I was alone because my daughter couldn't come. She had little kids. My parents couldn't come. And I sat for hours knowing that my son was going to have his kidney removed and my husband was going to receive it. And there was no guarantee that it would be successful. I had no idea how it would affect my son. and, you know, prayed, and I prayed. I knitted. I knitted just to pass the time, but I did a lot of praying. And George is fine, and Douglas is fine. And I think the prayers worked.
Yeah. It's rare that they do, or they do in that way when someone is ill. So that's amazing and wonderful. But I think more of the outcomes are like the one I was talking about. So that's lovely that we had that one to hear. Yeah. Rini and Laura. And then we go to text.
Yeah, I look at it differently. I don't have a specific, can't think of a specific incident, you know, where I prayed and then something sort of happened after, kind of to think of it that way. But I feel very, but I say little prayers of thanks and also to help people heal every time I light Shabbat candles. So for me, my grandmother did that and my mother did that. And so for me, when I light Shabbat candles, that's just a time that I take for myself to kind of communicate in a small prayer that's not written anywhere. It's just me. Before I wish my husband good Shabbos.
The only thing I want you to change is the word just. Take the word just out of that sentence because it is the prayer. Beautiful. So let's learn some text about how prayer became a central mitzvah for the Jewish people. But even before that, how many times a day is a Jew required to pray in the traditional framework of mitzvah?
3.
3. What if you're female?
None.
Once.
Oh,
Once.
1. Oh,
Uh,
okay.
What if you're female and egalitarian?
3.
With access comes responsibility. So I will say that prayer is really hard. Jewish prayer is really hard. And going to a prayer service at any synagogue, most Jews will find 5 tunes they don't like. The cantor's either too slow or too fast. Why isn't it over yet? Why was it so fast? How come we didn't do this one? And really, what we have to ask ourselves is, did we pray? So let's see where it comes from. Who would like to read the text 1 from Exodus, from Shemot? Do we have a reader?
I'll do
Great.
it.
Thank you.
The Lord said to Moses, "Thus shall you say to the Israelites, you yourselves saw that I spoke to you from the very heavens. With me, therefore, you shall not make any gods of silver, nor shall you make any gods of gold. Make for me an altar of earth and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your sacrifices of well-being, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I caused my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you."
Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. What are we asked to do? Someone jump in.
Make a sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually next week's Parsha. Pretty soon, this week's Parsha. Pretty soon after we get 10 Commandments, we are taught to make sacrifices. Okay. So who's doing the Dvarim, the Deuteronomy text? Unless anyone has anything to say about this text. By the way, what is the other sacrifice that we are taught to bring in the Torah that happens earlier, that happens during the time of Abraham? What sacrifice is Abraham taught to bring?
His son.
Yeah,
But so
Well, that-
I'm kind of confused when you say that we're taught to do sacrifices, but didn't that come from Abraham's time?
Yeah, we're taught to do, the first one it's before Abraham's time. And I know lots of people like to study Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, and that particular story. And, one of the later rationales that people give for that story is that this was the story against child sacrifice, right? That child sacrifice was done. Anyone know what Gay Ben Hinnom is? The valley of the Hinnom Valley,
Right.
right? It's right next to the old city of Jerusalem. You know the story about this? In English, what's Gay Ben Hinnom? Gehenna. That what the Christians call hell. Why is it hell? That's the valley where people in the ancient world would sacrifice their children. And so the story, the binding of Isaac, comes to teach us not to sacrifice our children. So we have a little bit of a evolution. First, there was child sacrifice in the ancient world. And part of Abraham's learning is that you don't sacrifice your children. Okay, we're going to see it develop even more. Deuteronomy.
If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving God with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late.
So how do we get good in this world according to this?
Serve God with your heart and soul, and I'll bring the rain so you have food.
And obey all the commandments. So
Commandment.
far. Yeah, obey the commandments. By the way, is this the reality of most people in the world?
I think it is.
I don't know. I think it is not. I think that, I was blessed to not be born in sub-Saharan Africa where there is rampant famine or in a warring country. Some of you may have been born in a warring country, but this is kind of hard theology. This is theology of if you do good, if you do right, if you observe my commandments, I will give you what you need.
It doesn't say, the translation is not good. It says, Shamoa Tishmeu, right? If you listen to my mitzvot, not if you obey my mitzvot, which is a big difference.
You are absolutely right. I will say that the reason it's translated this way is that Chazal understands
Right.
Tishma, Shema, listening as doing.
Right.
But literally, in a literal way, you're right. But the ancient rabbis understood it differently. But you're right. Yeah. And maybe we have to go with the literal on this one.
I understand it totally different.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
My
But if you understand it with the eyes of Chazal, of like the medieval rabbis, yeah, they thought it was asiyah. They thought it was doing. Jane, then we're going to move on.
I was just going to say in Shemot, they say Naaseh v'nishma. So maybe the Naaseh is assumed. I don't know.
Maybe.
That's a good drash. I like the drash. It's a good drash. Okay, so we're now thinking about the mitzvah of Tefilah and what Tefilah L'Hitzpalel means. So now we are told that we should do everything commanded. And what are we commanded in Exodus? We're commanded to bring sacrifices. That's the commandment. It's pretty clear in Exodus. The commandment is to bring sacrifices. I have not brought my grain sacrifice for many years, nor do I have my goodwill offering. I just forgot to bring them. I don't bring them. Obviously, because we don't do sacrifice anymore. So let's see how that progression happens. And we're going to go to the Talmud. We're going to go to the 500s of the Common Era. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina Amar, Tfilot Avot Tiknum. When who instituted the Tefilah? So would someone read this piece of Talmud for us? In English is great. Thank you, Rini. Oh, you are mute. Rini, you're mute.
Sorry, I muted because Ted was walking around. It has been stated, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said the Tefilah were instituted by the patriarchs. Rav Joshua ben Levi says the Tefilah were instituted to replace the daily sacrifice. According to Rav Yossi ben Hanina, Abraham instituted the morning Tefilah, as it says. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he had stood, and standing means only prayer, as it says. Then Pinchas stood up and prayed.
Okay, we're going to stop. We're going to do each part. It's a really long text, but has anyone here studied this text before? Okay, so it's a really long text, and it is, again, the rabbis showing the connection back to the beginning of monotheism, to the beginning of our patriarchs, and why now in the year 500, over 400 years after the temple was destroyed, why prayer really is more ancient than that and goes all the way back to the patriarchs. By the way, historically did it? I don't know, but I don't think we can know. But we know that the rabbis are trying to convince us, the rabbis of the time of the Talmud, that the prayer services we do today can be traced all the way back. So what do we learn about Abraham? And how do they teach it to us? Which is the important part. Look at the Talmud piece.
Yeah, they forward reference Pinchas, who stood up and prayed. So they're saying stood up is associated with prayer, and Abraham stood up.
Yeah, this is an amazing, awesome wordplay. I mean, I'm sure the Hebrew speakers among us are laughing, right? It's an amazing wordplay, and you described it perfectly. They go back. Pinchas uses the word vayamod, amidah. So, and he prayed, amidah and litzpalel are in the same sentence. So we must logically connect them earlier to Abraham, who has the word amad, amidah, standing. It's lovely. I don't know if it's historically true, but it's certainly lovely. So let's go to Yitzchak. By the way, if Abraham instituted the evening prayer, what did Isaac institute? Don't look, just guess.
Oh,
What? I don't hear it.
I already looked.
Mincha, the
Oh,
afternoon. Mincha. Okay, so let's continue reading. Isaac instituted.
Do you want me to keep reading?
If someone else wants to read, so we'll send it around the Zoom. A new reader. I mean, you read beautifully, but let's get everyone involved.
I can read.
Great, Myra.
Isaac instituted the afternoon Tefilah, as it says, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field at eventide.
Lasuach or lasiach, but it's really lasuach in Hebrew, yeah?
Genesis 25:63. And meditation means only prayer, as it says, a prayer of the afflicted when he faints and pours out his meditation, shapuach sicho, before the Lord.
Yishpoch sicho, right.
O Lord, hear my prayer, let my cry come before you.
Someone want to explain what happens here? Jane, you could, because it's the same thing.
wait.
It's the same word play. They're making it a word play where they find a verse later that connects a word that Isaac uses or word used about Isaac. They connect that verse to prayer. So he must have done the next prayer service because he comes out to the field in the afternoon, eventide. Eventide means afternoon in Old English, right? Lasuach basadeh. Okay. Who then did the next prayer?
Well, Jacob,
Well, of course. So somebody read that.
I can read.
Great.
Instituted the evening prayer as it says, and he lighted
Vayifga b'makom.
and Pegi'ah means
Yeah,
only,
vayifga.
as it says, therefore pray not thou for this people, neither lift up nor cry for them, neither make concession to me. Jeremiah 7:16. But ata al titpalel. I'm reading Hebrew and English.
I know.
Amazeba al tisaba adam rina utfila ve'al tifka bi ki eneni shomea.
So, Big Adol, in the large picture, why are the rabbis in the 5th century of the Common Era telling us that Abraham instituted Shacharit, the morning prayer, Isaac instituted Mincha, the afternoon prayer, and Jacob instituted Mariv, Arvit, the evening prayer? Why are the rabbis in the 5th century doing that? Take a guess. Or tell me.
They wanted the people to follow the role models of the patriarchs and to pray 3 times a day.
I want to turn that a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I like most of it, and I want to turn it a little bit on its head. Rini, do you want to turn it?
I think they wanted the people to pray, so they said that the patriarchs already did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. They wanted the people to now do prayer. This was 430 years or more after the temple was destroyed. They knew they weren't going back. They needed to show how this newfangled thing called Tefilah was connected not only to the temple, but to the very patriarchs.
It's okay.
And so they connect it. It's kind of beautiful, I think. Anyway, I'm going to read the last 2. You know what? We're not going to read those last 2 because we don't have a million hours. And this is just a little bit more about, read the last line. Avot tiknum v'asmachtenu rabbanan. The patriarchs instituted the tefillot, and the rabbis found a basis for them in the offerings. So this is when it's really turning its head. What they're saying here is actually the way the temple service functioned, where there was a morning, afternoon, and evening sacrifice, that was really established. That's great. Well, thanks, Suzanne. I'll bring that up in a sec. That was really established by the patriarchs. And then what the rabbis in the Beit HaMikdash and the Kohanim did is that they made the sacrifices at those times. And really prayer is only going back to the original. I love it. I don't know if it's true historically, but it's a beautiful way of thinking about it. Suzanne said, what about Chana? Because Chana really establishes prayer. What kind of prayer does Chana establish?
Silent.
Well, actually, she
from
does
her
it out
heart.
loud because they think she's drugged.
yeah.
So a prayer that's an outpouring that is spontaneous. Okay, now I love the Chana model of prayer because I think that when we think about your prayer experiences, most of the ones that are most meaningful are actually not necessarily in community, but are at times of need. So let's do the text study about prayer b'kihila, prayer in a community. Who would like to read? We're at text study C, someone who hasn't read yet. Okay, Najat, you want to go?
I do, but I'm not sure about which.
Okay,
Text 5?
Page 18, text 4.
Oh, okay.
Should we go to someone else?
Yes.
At page 18 at the bottom.
Okay, I got
Okay,
it.
got
That's
it?
good.
Great.
Yeah. How do we know that when 10 people pray together, the Shekhinah is with them? Because of the verse in Psalm 82:1, the Lord stands among the congregation of the Lord.
Anyone want to explain what the Talmud is trying to tell us? So first of all, what's Shekhinah?
Sort of like the light of the Lord.
The heat.
God's indwelling, feminine presence, God's sense of nearness to us, the word similar, shachen, neighbor, God being there, right? Imminent presence, right? With you, God's presence with us. When does that happen? When 10 of us are praying together. Okay, pretty lovely. Next piece of Talmud, someone want to go?
Where do we find the minyan means 10?
Well, it is in here. I will, if it's not in this package, I will bring it.
Oh,
Okay, you want to do 8? Gila, you want to do 8?
That's 6. Oh, okay.
no, 8.
What is this one? What is the meaning of the verse in Psalms 69:14?
Yeah, but say in Hebrew, because this is a verse people might know.
ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון, אימתי את רצון בשעה שהציבור מתפללים.
So we say early on in our prayer service, like at the end of Matovu, Vani tfilati, and I, let me translate this, Va'ani, and I, tfilati, am the prayer to you, God. May this be an auspicious time. What is the auspicious time? When we're all together. Okay, we're going to keep going. Unless anyone wants to say anything, we're running through these texts before we get to the bigger ones. Who will do the next one?
I will.
Great.
One cannot read the Shema and cannot communally stand before the ark, and priests cannot lift their hands to bless the people. The Torah scroll is not read, and the Haftarah from the prophets is not read unless 10 are present.
Yes, great question.
Did I read the right one? Yeah.
Yep.
No. Okay.
Yep. Is that good for you? There's one of the sources.
Rabbi,
Yep.
how do they decide on 10?
I can bring the midrashim, but there's another
oh.
sense of midrashim. Here you have that it's 10.
Oh, okay.
10 is the minyan. Pachot me'asara. Which we don't actually know if before the rabbis put this together, if that was a thing, but it is a thing by the time of the Talmud, actually earlier, but earlier because the time of the Mishnah. So these are the things that we don't do unless you have a minyan. Hey, is this true today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
What if this is true today?
You can't read the Torah without a minyan. You don't say Haftarah without a minyan that I know. And you don't say Shema with it. Well,
You say
you
Shema.
can say Shema by yourself.
Yeah, you say
Can't do
Shema.
Baruch Hu without a minyan.
Right, but you say Shema. So this
Right.
is just one of those times where we learn that things that are written in the Mishnah don't always come to be the halacha, the law of it. But there are some things that you need a minyan for, which is why sometimes we look for people to come early to the service, either on Saturday or Sunday morning, so that people who are saying Mourner's Kaddish early in the service have 10. Really, the rabbis are saying here, they're putting such a value on communal prayer that they're saying you need a certain number of people to do it. Okay. So Gila, I want you to read the next one.
Amar Rabbi Chaya bar Abba, what's AR?
Amar Rabbi.
הרבי יוחנן דאמר קרא, ונקדשתי בתוך בני ישראל, כל דבר שבקדושה לא יהא פחות מ10. Got it.
Yeah. What is the source for this law? They ask also in the Talmud. Rabbi Chia ben Abba, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, quotes a verse from Leviticus. I will be sanctified among the people of Israel. And then the Talmud says that means that every act of Kiddusha requires at least 10. By the way, you know what it doesn't say? It doesn't
For
say
women?
requires it.
Men.
What?
Doesn't say 10 men.
Correct. Because and obviously the reason is because they couldn't imagine a time where a woman would count in the minyan. I think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that women, look, we know that women in the certainly north of Israel and the excavated area synagogues, we think women and men sat together, but we don't necessarily think that they counted in a minyan.
Could the number 10 have come from the 10 Commandments? That's why they picked 10?
Okay, so,
But who decide what is דבר שבקדושה?
aha, that's a really more important question, right? And that changed, because if you look at the Mishnah on top, the Gila's question is, who decides what you need, a davar shebikdusha, that you need the sanctity, the kedusha of a minyan to say it? That changes, because here in the Mishnah, it says you can't say the Shema, and we all say the Shema. So, right, it's a little bit subjective. Who decides? The rabbis, Chazal, and the rabbis in the time of the Gemara decide this, and it's changed from what it says in the Mishnah, which is, you know, when people say Jewish law doesn't change, yes, it does. It changes from the Mishnah to the Talmud. It changes over time. And here's one good example right here. So what does this have to do with personal prayer? Yeah, Rini.
I think there's personal prayer, and then I think when you're in a community, you feel the strength of the community around you because you're doing something together. So it says, you know, based on the above passage, why do you think it is significant that prayers are offered for the sick, the about to be married, one who is
Right. We say, right.
and all those things with the minyan, because those are times when you need the community around you, like saying the Mortis Kaddish. You could say it by yourself, but you feel the strength from other people around you.
Right, and of course that becomes a davar shebikdusha, that you can only say it with a minyan. But I mean, I think one of the pieces that we don't see here is, what does it mean to pray? What does it mean besides saying these things? I keep thinking of my pastor friend, but when do you pray, Rabbi? When do you pour out your heart? I mean, I feel like it's during the quiet time of the Amidah, when I sometimes don't say the words that are in the prayer book, but say my own words. I hope that you find time during prayer services as well to not follow the sing-along, but to be part of the pray-along yourself.
Is Shema Tefilah?
So traditionally, just Amidah is Tefilah earlier, and then Shema becomes part of the Matbeah Shel Tefilah, the order of part of Tefilah. But no, traditionally it's Amidah is Tefilah. I think here, though, they are reading anything that you do in a prayer service as Tefilah. Okay, we're going to go to we want to get to the modern texts. We want to go to some Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, because, you know, got to learn the laws of it. Who hasn't read, who could read for us, Mishnah Torah? Anyone able to read for us? Okay, thanks, Sam.
See.
How was-
How is public worship conducted? One person recites the prayers aloud and all the rest listen. This is not done if there are less than 10 adults present, including the reader.
straightforward. Why did not everyone pray, do you think? Why did they listen?
Don't know.
What?
They don't know how.
They don't know how, right? So they said amen instead. Or they didn't read.
Yeah.
Or they couldn't afford to have a book,
Mhm.
right? This is written before the printing press, so not everyone had books. Okay, let's keep going.
The reader acts on behalf of the assembled congregation. When, for example, one recites the prayers while the people listen and respond amen after each blessing, it is as if they are praying. This only applies to one who does not know how to worship. But one who knows how to worship, knows how, does not fulfill the mitzvah unless they recite the prayers themselves.
Okay, so what do we learn here that's a little different?
That it's only okay to rely on a reader if you don't know how to pray.
Yeah, if you read, then it's your responsibility. It's on you. Remember, this is all couched in the language of mitzvah as responsibility. If you know, then you must. If you know how to do it, then you must do it. And if you don't know how to do it, then you listen. Okay. The appointed congregational leader, keep going.
Should be known for their knowledge and good conduct. If they are an elderly person, so much the better. An effort should be made to find someone with a pleasant voice who is fluent in reading.
So even Maimonides said the person leading the davening should be someone you trust, but someone with a good voice. That actually will get codified in later Jewish law, that kol na'im v'na'eh, that we want a voice that is lovely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I had been to many a bar and bat mitzvah where the child involved was severely handicapped and was not able to do it precisely according to how it's written.
Yeah.
This suggests that whatever they did was nullified.
I don't know if it was nullified or if it was.
Well, this suggests that since they couldn't do it properly, it sort of didn't happen.
Okay, so here's the thing. It won't just be with people who are special needs. It will be with most of the Jewish people who don't necessarily read Hebrew. We can say that. And we are also talking about the Middle Ages, about the laws of how to lead Tefilah. This is not the laws we go on today. But it actually says something a little different, that the appointed congregational leader should be known for their knowledge and good contact. So I would translate that they should know what they're saying and they should be a mensch. You don't want people who are not a mensch leading you in davening. If they're an elderly person, better. An effort should be made to have someone with a pleasant voice who is fluent. An effort should be made. It's not necessary, but an effort should be made. So I don't think it's making the sort of exclusionary statement you're seeing. I think there are other pieces of Jewish law that make that statement later. What I'm saying is I think you are right, but it's not in this statement. It's in the Shulchan Aruch. It's a couple hundred years later. But this is actually like a lovely thing to think about. You want the person who is leading you in davening to be upstanding. You want them to basically kind of know the davening. I don't think it's commenting yet on that. I also don't think that we do that today. This 800 years old. If it did say that, it would be a pretty exclusionary text, right? Which probably many of our texts are. Not sure this one is, but many of them are. Okay, we're gonna read two more pieces. Reuven Hammer was my teacher. He just died this past year. He lived in Israel. He was one of the liturgists of the 20th century of the conservative movement. Michael Paley is a rabbi. I think he is now in maybe Budapest or Prague, somewhere. He used to be in New York. So let's read about what he says in the Sim Shalom. Do any of you have, you used to use Sim Shalom, right? So the Or Hadash was the beautiful commentary on it that Reuven Hammer put together, Rabbi Hammer. Who would like to read it? Prayers and intimate activity.
I will. Don't mind. Prayer is an intimate activity, but blessing of another is grounded in relationship. Prayer's roots are in intimacy, but its branches are community. The traditional forms of the Misha Berach prayer emphasize the importance of this connection by ending the phrases such as together with all Israel or among the other sick of Israel.
And we're going to stop you for 1 second. What's the change? Arlene, I want you to know we make lots of changes in prayer and lots of changes in text. What's the change that we at the Jewish Center and many other conservative and reform synagogues make in this prayer that wasn't made even 10 years ago when this curriculum was written?
In the world.
Yeah, we don't say Chole Yisrael. We don't say all sick Jewish people. We say all sick people. So we have progressed. Thank God. We will keep progressing. The arc of justice bends, right? So there's a line in here that just gets me, right? Prayer is an intimate activity. It's so interesting to say that prayer is an intimate activity, but one that we're supposed to do in a large community. How do you understand this? Think about how that might be understood. Prayer's roots are in intimacy, but its branches are community.
I think that we could all be saying the same prayers or singing the same prayers, but everybody's individual inner experience is different.
And everyone's real, like what you're praying for is different. Like maybe you come to shul, to a service or to an online Zoom minyan, and you are praying for relief from the pain you are feeling, physical or emotional. Or maybe you are just praying for relief for someone else from their pain. Or maybe you're praying for health or wealth or, so none of us are going to pray the same words or have the same experience. Prayer is by nature existential. It's each one in our own experience. So why have the group experience? There's not a right or wrong. Just why have the group experience as opposed to just praying yourself? Yeah, Rini?
Comforting.
The group supports you. As I said before, the group supports you. You're with other people. If you were at a Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur service by yourself, it wouldn't have the same impact as everyone around you singing. I love it when, everyone's participating, and this is my community. I know where I am. I'm at home, and then I can do my own thing if I want to.
Okay, beautiful. Anyone else different to add to that? Yeah, Sarah.
You're all in the same, we're all in the same space at the same time. And to me, that's something that's can be very powerful. That time, the bounds of space and time.
And it's so beautiful. And also, when you're in that prayer space together, I would love for everyone to understand that the person next to them or the person in the row behind them or in front of them are having a radically different experience than you. Because they are coming with their own neshama and their own worries and their own tsuris and their own self. So standing near you, that person maybe is helping you or you are helping them. And like life itself, we hold each other up, but we are ultimately alone in our thoughts and prayers. Anyone else want to say anything about this? Just prayer's roots are in intimacy, but its branches are community.
Now, I would say that it's even more than our own community, because the same prayers are said everywhere, or almost everywhere in the world, including Israel and wherever. And I like to think of that, as well as the fact that our ancestors and many.
Yeah, and you know what? I will tell you something that is so I was once, I'm going to lamb on and add Christians and Muslims and everyone else that prays to this. I was once at a Catholic funeral of a congregant's mother, and we were at the church service. The congregant was Jewish. She had converted to Judaism, and her mother is Catholic, and we were at the church. And then we were going to the cemetery, and on the way to the cemetery, the priest got violently ill and was taken to the emergency room. And his last words to me were, "Do your Malay prayer. It's the same as ours anyway. Do it in English."
Oh, Molly. That's wild.
Right.
Wow. El Molly.
It's in the Christian tradition called the committal of a soul. It's the same thing as we do because we share a lot of prayer traditions. So some of our prayer is really so universal, and some of it is connected to other Jews, and some of it is only for ourselves. Only for ourselves. I love that it says prayer's roots are in intimacy, because essentially each of us has to create our own prayer life. And it's not only about the Shaliach Tzipor having a nice voice, or the rabbi have something to say that week, but it's really like, what are you doing? What's the avodah shebalev, the work in your heart? The avodah was the service in the temple. Now it's avodah shebalev. Lee Garber has her hand raised, and we were so excited to see you in shul a few weeks back, or last week, whenever you were here.
Yeah, it was, I guess, 2 weeks ago, because this past week was freezing, and
Yeah,
and
we were
nobody wanted to venture out.
Happy to meet you in person. Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually along the lines. What I was going to say was that it was so lovely to be there in person, and one of the things we were commenting to each other afterwards, my wife Andrea and I were saying how it was so nice to be there in person after, seeing your lovely synagogue on Zoom for a bunch during the pandemic. And we were also saying it's so interesting that, you go anywhere and it's the familiar service that, we can go to a shul we haven't been to and know all the prayers and, join with the community. So it was really a nice thing.
And actually what I would add is that because we have Zoom classes, you walked in and knew Suzanne. So there were people that you knew.
Yeah, no, I knew a few people, which was really interesting.
I love this next paragraph. Misha Baruch elaborated to its fullest, encourages the support and energy of the whole community, provides a time to appreciate the unique contribution of each person, to articulate how each of our contributions is necessary for the wholeness of Israel. And this is the Misha Baruch that we don't do, that in some shuls, they do a Misha Baruch for each person who comes up for an Aliyah. It's a nice tradition and would make your lunch much later. So, okay, Barry Holtz, I encourage you to buy this book or just borrow my copy of it. But the book of his that you really should buy, professor at the seminary, is called Back to the Sources. There's an amazing article in it by Bob Goldenberg, blessed memory, on the Talmud. And really there's a explanation of what all of our ancient texts are. So for this last source, could someone read? And what time is the State of the Union? Isn't it 9?
9.
Okay, we're good. So
9.
someone read, please. With a mellifluous, beautiful voice. Anyone, please?
I will if you.
Sure.
Okay. There are many.
Wait, well, hold on 1 second, because remember, this is really about how is Tefilah mitzvah. So now go.
Okay. There are many people who might want to find their way into commandments, to try them on, so to speak, and perhaps grow into them. Here, I think, are the possibilities. To begin with, there is one dimension of the commandments not to be underestimated. Many of the commandments are performed within a social context, a community of like-minded people. If the personal significance side of the mitzvot might be seen as the vertical dimension of the commandments, at least in the traditional imagery, one's connection to God, let us say, this other side of the commandments is its horizontal dimension, performing the mitzvot, waving the lulav and etrog, for example, with others around you, doing the same deed gives the individual a sense of belonging, a feeling that one is part of something larger than oneself.
Okay, we're going to stop you and we're going to ask Sam, since you do go to every morning service, can you read that next one? I think that
in that sense of the feeling, I have had attending an early morning weekday service. Not all the people that show up are great spiritual masters seeking communion with the holy. Very few are, I suppose. But starting the day in communal prayer, seeing friends and neighbors in the first hours of the day gives everyone, even the least devout, a sense of being bound up in the framework of community and a sense of shared purpose in an enterprise sanctioned by history and tradition. In a time such as ours, characterized by loneliness and displacement, the attraction of a welcoming community needs no explanation.
who would like to comment on these beautiful words? Yeah, Bob.
Well, I have to say this whole discussion leaves me cold because I haven't the slightest idea what prayer is. And I can honestly say I've never had a prayer in my entire life that I would worth repeating. There are a couple of prayers I don't think I should repeat, but those are somewhat, let's say, self-serving. But I do know grace. I do know grace. And I suppose a desire there is to achieve grace. And there are ways of achieving grace. And I think what Sam just read is a way of achieving grace.
So it's interesting that you use the word grace, because earlier tonight, Suzanne said the word, what about Chana? And actually, Chana, we say, is the paradigm for all individual prayer, right? She mumbles this prayer and we thought she was drunk, but really she was praying. And what does Chana mean? Or chen? Chen or Chana means grace. So the Jewish concept of prayer is exactly what you're talking about. It's seeking a sense of chen, of grace, or chana, or being like chana, being in a sense of grace. That is not ever a communal endeavor. That is only the individual can feel that. The community can create a feeling, but grace is only felt by an individual, each one at a time. So what you're saying is beautiful and perfect, because ancient Judaism decided that the paradigm of prayer was seeking grace. So thank you. And then I'll ask you, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'll ask everyone. So if you come to shul on a Shabbos morning or go to any shul, why? What does it do for you? What are you seeking? Or are you fulfilling a commandment to the community or to God? And obviously with this, there are no wrong answers. It's just an explanation of who we are.
For me, when I come, it's like a sense of security, like inner security but it also gives me a sense of like communal peace for others, because when I see like the different families come in, doesn't matter what time, like they're safe and they came for the same reason, and regardless of what time they arrive, but they made it, and they have a sense of overall calm, or a sense of shalom. And my favorite is watching the young ones when they either are concluding, you know, the different Hallel, you know, at the end. For me, it's something positive, and I take it with me for the rest of the weekend. So, and that's communal for
You
me.
come for that security and community in the sense of watching the generations, and there's something that feels warm or communal about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Why else? Anyone else? Myra?
Oh, I do feel the sense of community, but also once I start singing the prayers, I lose my whatever egocentric concerns that I might have that week, or things that are bothering me, and they go flying away, and I see a bigger picture. So it makes me look at the bigger picture and have a lot of gratitude for many blessings and for sharing that with the congregation.
Anyone else why you come?
I have said over the last many years when I've been living in Florida, part of the time, that this is home. That is not. And I'm grateful this year that I'm actually here rather than in Florida, a decision that we made. Because when I go into the synagogue, it is my home. I may not know all the prayers, and that really doesn't much matter to me.
Right.
That's where I am and where I feel I belong.
So,
and a part of it, what Myra and somebody else was saying, interestingly, I had an adult bat mitzvah 20 years ago, something like that. And I remember being on the bima, and I did the whole Musaf service. I don't understand the Hebrew. It sort of didn't matter. You know, I did my Torah reading, I did the whole Musaf service, but my feeling of what I had there, and it plays into what a couple of people said, including you, Myra. As I was saying it, I knew that those same words had been spoken hour by hour across the Atlantic and across the Pacific by everybody that was saying it, on one level, that horizontal level, and on another level in time. My father, my grandfather, my great, and so on and so on. They had all also said those same words.
and it's interesting to add, you know, the masters of Eastern prayer, Eastern religion would teach us that prayer is also mantra. Prayer is the ability to put yourself in a space, even if you don't know the words per se, and to say those words over and over again and connect yourself to past and present and future.
So it's that, and it's where my community is. I know that when I walk in there, I know people, they know me. Home.
And other people, it's not being home, but walking into a shul. And as Lee said earlier, it was her first time at this particular shul, but she grew up in an Orthodox shul. It didn't matter. The prayers are similar enough, right? It doesn't matter. Anyone else? So I want to go back for one moment to Bob's statement about what is prayer? And really, it's about reflection and self-reflecting. And earlier, Gila alluded to the fact that the rabbis actually only consider the Amidah Tefilah. The rabbis called the Amidah Tefilah because the Amidah is the part of the prayer where we are self-reflective. And I would say even less so on the Shabbat Amidah, but if you could get yourself a copy of a weekday Amidah with the 19 different blessings, and go down each of those blessings and not say the traditional words, but use them as a guide for thinking about how we are each, how you are doing, how I am doing on each of those. So I'm going to give you the example. Najat, give me one more second. In that weekday Amidah, we say these words, Slach lanu avinu, and we tap our hearts like on Yom Kippur, ki chatanu, mechalanu malkeinu ki fashanu. Forgive us, Creator, Father, Parent, for we have sinned. And there's more words, but then we think about what our own misdoings are. Another prayer is Atachonen la'adam da'at. You give people da'at, knowledge, wisdom. And then we can stop and think about what wisdom and knowledge we need. That's the prayer. Healing. The upbuilding of Jerusalem. There's 19 different prayers in it. And I say to people, if you want to like think about prayer, go to a weekday Amidah and study that. And then figure out how to put your own prayer into each one. I'm going to end, and I'm going to say that I will not be here next week. I am taking a little vacation, but I will be here the week after. I don't know.